Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dig into some serious hockey history. We're talking trades, folks that kind of build dynasties, crush dreams, and leave fans debating for decades.
And it's more than just stats and salary caps. There's a whole lot of human drama that goes into those deals, rivalries between general managers, power struggles, you name it.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to get into all that. But first,
Yeah.
I want to rewind way back, back to the very beginning. I was doing some reading, and it's interesting, right? Baseball, they can point to their first ever trade, clear as day. But hockey, it's like trying to find a puck in a snowstorm.
You're not wrong there. Baseball had Toad Ramsey back in 1885. Traded for another player, plus $750. Can you imagine that making headlines now? In soccer, well, they were swapping players back in the early days of the English leagues, too. But hockey, those early records are a bit of a mystery.
Right. It's like, who knows what went down in those smoky back rooms? We might have a date, 1918, maybe a deal between Ottawa and Toronto, but even that one's a little fishy. Seems like Toronto might have bent the rules, and the league made him cough up a player. And don't forget, professional hockey wasn't just the NHL back then. You had leagues like the Pacific Coast Hockey Association trying to poach star players from the East. Wild West, I tell you.
It really was. And even when we do have records, it's not always clear cut. Plus, we often focus on the NHL, but those other leagues were wheeling and dealing too. The Western Pennsylvania Hockey League, the WPHL, for example, they were making trades as early as 1907. One example, a player named Angus Dutchkoff, traded by the Pittsburgh Bankers, then traded for again just weeks later. Talk about a confusing time to be a player.
Imagine that phone call. Hey, Dutch, unpack your bags. We're shipping you right back. But even with those early deals, you can see the seeds being planted, teams trying to figure out which players were the real deal, trying to build something special.
It's true. And those early trades, they tell a story about the power dynamics back then. Players, they had very little say. It was all about the owners and managers calling the shots.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. We can't talk about impactful trades without mentioning, well.
The Gretzky trade,
Yeah.
1988. It was a cultural earthquake, not just a hockey trade. It transcended the sport. I mean, Gretzky leaving Edmonton, going to LA. It was unthinkable to a lot of people, especially in Canada.
Right. It would be like trading away hockey itself.
Well, there were definitely financial pressures on the Oilers at the time, and Gretzky, he was open to new challenges. But the impact of that trade, it went way beyond money. His move to LA was huge for popularizing the sport in the States.
Talk about a legacy. Okay, so speaking of legacy-defining trades, we got to talk about King Clancy. Talk about one player changing a franchise's whole trajectory.
Absolutely. 1930, Conn Smythe, he was building the Toronto Maple Leafs into the powerhouse they are today, and he managed to snag Clancy. Now, Clancy was a smaller guy, but man, could he play. He brought this electricity to the ice.
And wasn't Clancy also key in helping Smythe get the funding for Maple Leaf Gardens?
That's right. To build a state-of-the-art arena during the Depression, you needed a good story. And Clancy was that story. He wasn't just elevating their game, he was helping build their future.
And then there's the Eric Lindros saga. That's like the ultimate example of player power.
1992, Lindros, this young phenom, gets drafted by Quebec and refuses to play for them, just flat out refuses. It sparked a bidding war, teams offering up everything but the kitchen sink players, draft picks, you name it.
And the league had to listen. It was a whole new era for player empowerment.
No doubt about it. That one trade forced teams to rethink how they handled young stars. You think you're drafting a player. Maybe you're drafting a whole new set of rules.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the drama behind hockey trades. We'll be back in a minute to uncover more of these stories. Don't touch that dial. All right, so we're back and ready to dig into more of these wild hockey trades. And, no position on the ice sparks more debate than the goalie.
Right.
They're either the hero or, well, let's just say they have a tough night at the office.
And those debates, they get amplified when we're talking trades. Goalie trades, they're fascinating because the logic isn't always clear. It's not always just about stats.
It's like trying to predict the weather. Right. A little bit of science, a little bit of gut feeling. Speaking of gut feelings, Roberto Luongo. Talk about a wild ride.
Oh, yeah, Luongo. Traded from the Islanders to Vancouver early on, then ends up back east with Florida. And that early trade, the Islanders must have kicked themselves for that one. They had a young, talented goalie, and they let him go for, well, not much in return, really.
It's like trading away a winning lottery ticket.
It really is. And Luongo, he goes on to have a stellar career, one of the best of his generation. Sometimes the best moves are the ones you don't make.
It's true. Patience.
Yeah.
It's a virtue, even in hockey.
Oh.
And speaking of tough goodbyes, Marc-Andre Fleury and Vegas. Man, that one stung.
Oh, that one was rough, even for me, and I'm supposed to be impartial, right? Fleury, he was Vegas, their first ever draft pick, a Stanley Cup champion. Then the salary cap reality check hits, and he's gone off to Chicago.
It was like finding out your favorite pizza place closed shop. Just heartbreaking.
But gotta give Fleury credit, he handled it like a pro. Class act, that guy.
Now, before we move on from these goalie journeys, the Matthew Tkachuk trade. Not just about goalies, but it shows how much the league's changing, right?
Oh, yeah, that was a blockbuster. Tkachuk, a star in Calgary, says, I'm out. And suddenly, the Flames have to play by a whole new set of rules.
It's like the players are holding the cards now.
To an extent, yeah. Teams can't just assume they can hold on to a player. And this wasn't just any player, this was Tkachuk. So yeah, that trade, it shook things up.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about those trades that make you do a double take, those steals, those head scratchers, the best trades in NHL history.
The ones that make GMs look like geniuses, or, well, the opposite.
Exactly. Sometimes it's not about getting the biggest name, but finding that perfect fit, that diamond in the rough, like Anaheim getting Teemu Selan.
1996, they get a young, dynamic scorer, and all it takes is a few players who, let's be honest, didn't exactly light the world on fire.
Selan, a legend in Anaheim, led them to a cup in '07. Makes you wonder what the Jets were thinking.
Right. Sometimes you got to tip your hat to the other team, you know? They saw something others missed, just like Boston with Tim Thomas in '05.
Thomas. Talk about a late bloomer.
The Bruins, they took a chance on a journeyman goalie, a guy who'd bounced around the minors, Europe, you name it. And what does he do? Becomes one of the best, wins a cup in 2011, even takes home the Conn Smythe. Unbelievable.
Speaking of unbelievable, Dominik Hasek to Buffalo in '92.
The Dominator, playing in Czechoslovakia when the Sabres traded for him, not exactly a household name, right? Then, boom, 6 Vezina trophies. 6.
That's not luck. That's finding a needle in a haystack of goalies.
It makes you think, back then, teams weren't quite as tuned in to the talent coming out of Europe. The Sabres, they were ahead of the curve.
All right, another franchise changer. Calgary, snagging Jerome Ijingla.
1995, they trade away Joe Nieuwendyk, a star. And for who? A young, unproven Ijinla. Talk about a gamble.
And did that gamble ever pay off? Ijinla became Calgary, led them in scoring for over a decade, a true leader.
The heart and soul of that franchise. Okay, now let's talk about a trade that was pure class, pure sentiment. Ray Bourque to Colorado in 2000.
Bourque, a legend in Boston, spent almost his entire career there, accomplished everything except
Winning the cup, he was nearing the end, and the Avalanche, they traded for him to give him that chance.
and the rest is history. He gets his name on the cup in '01. You can tell how much it meant to him.
It was a testament to his career, to the respect he had across the league. Sometimes it's more than just the game, you know?
Absolutely. Okay, back to those shrewd moves. Columbus getting Sergei Bobrovsky in 2012. That was a smart one.
Bobrovsky, he hadn't quite found his groove in Philly, but the Blue Jackets, they saw something there.
And they were right. 2 Vezina trophies later.
Sometimes a change of scenery is all it takes. New team, new system, new opportunity.
Speaking of new opportunities, Dallas bringing in Brett Hull. 1998. They meant business.
A scoring machine. Already had a cup with St. Louis. And the Stars, they were ready to win. They get Hull, boom. Stanley Cup champions in '99.
It's almost like they planned it that way.
You never know. But it shows you need that firepower, that clutch player who can deliver when it matters most.
Speaking of clutch, how about Edmonton getting a young Wayne Gretzky back in '78?
The trade that launched a dynasty. Gretzky, he was playing in the WHA back then.
Right.
And the Oilers, they saw the future. 4 cups in the '80s, all thanks to a trade for a kid who hadn't even played an NHL game.
Talk about a crystal ball. Okay, Florida getting Pavel Buro. Now, this one wasn't about winning it all, but
Entertainment. Buro, the Russian Rocket, was pure excitement on skates. The Panthers, they might not have won a cup with him, but he brought the fans to their feet.
sometimes that's just as important, giving the fans something to cheer for. Just like the Kings trading for Marcel Dion back in '75.
Dion, he was stuck on a struggling Red Wings team, but the Kings, they took a chance, and he became a legend in LA.
Proves that sometimes all you need is a fresh start. Just like Devin Dubnyk in Minnesota 2015. Talk about turning a season around.
The Wild, they were struggling. Dubnyk, he was a backup at best. They take a chance, and suddenly they're in the playoffs. Dubnyk's a Vezina finalist. Crazy how things work out.
It's like they found a lucky penny on the ice.
Oh,
Okay, got to talk about the Canadiens. They've made some legendary trades. Ken Dryden, 1971.
talk about spotting talent. Dryden had barely played in the NHL. And he leads them to count 'em, 6 Stanley Cups.
6. Okay, that's just showing off. But it does show you the importance of scouting, of seeing that potential before anyone else. Just like Nashville with Philip Forsberg in 2013.
Forsberg, he was a bit of a project when they got him from Washington, but man, did he blossom. Key part of their cup run in 2017.
Another example of patience, right? Sometimes you gotta let those young players develop. And speaking of young players, how about the Devils getting Scott Niedermayer in 91?
Niedermayer, he was playing juniors when the Devils traded for his rights. They saw the potential, took the risk, and it paid off big time. 3 cups with the Devils.
They built a dynasty with that one trade. Okay, back to the Islanders for a sec. Butch Goring in 1980, a trade that brought them leadership and, well, facial hair.
The Islanders, they were young, talented, but they needed that veteran presence. Goring, he was the missing piece. 4 straight cups.
The beard, the helmet, the grit, it all worked. Okay, Mark Messier to the Rangers, 1991. A seismic shift.
Messier, already a legend. 5 cups with Edmonton. The Rangers, they were making a statement with that trade. We're done rebuilding, they said.
And they weren't kidding. Messier leads them to their first cup in over 5 decades. Talk about breaking a curse.
He was the missing piece for them. A leader, a winner. And he could handle New York City. That's not easy.
Handling pressure, that's what it's all about. Like Ottawa getting Zdeno Chara back in 2001.
Chara, he was young, still developing, not the dominant force he'd become. But the Senators, they saw it in him.
And sometimes those under-the-radar trades, those are the ones that pay off the most. Speaking of paying off, Bernie Parent back to Philly in 73.
He'd played for them before, but they bring him back, and what does he do? Backstops them to 2 straight cups.
Talk about a homecoming. Okay, time for the no-brainer trade. Pittsburgh drafting Mario Lemieux in 84.
Lemieux, the first overall pick. A generational talent. 2 cups with the Penguins. Sometimes the best trades are the ones you don't have to make, right?
When you draft a legend, yeah, makes things easier. Okay, San Jose making a splash with Joe Thornton in 2005.
Thornton, a star in Boston, goes to San Jose. That was huge. He changed the culture there, led them to the Cup final in 2016.
That's what leadership does. It elevates everyone around them. Just like Al MacInnis in St. Louis back in 94.
MacInnis, he'd won a cup with Calgary. He brought that experience to the Blues, helped them reach the final in 96.
Talk about a veteran presence making a difference. All right, another draft day no-brainer. Tampa Bay taking Vincent Lecavalier first overall in 98.
Lecavalier, a franchise player from day one, led the Lightning to their first ever cup in 2004.
Sometimes it's as simple as drafting the best player available. Now the Maple Leafs. They've had their share of trades, but Doug Gilmour in 92, that was huge.
Gilmour, a cup winner with Calgary, brings instant credibility to Toronto, leads them to back-to-back conference finals.
Talk about revitalizing a franchise. Okay, how about Vancouver bringing in not 1, but 2 future Hall of Famers? The Sedin twins, 1999.
Henrik and Daniel. Playing in Sweden, Canucks get their rights, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Pure magic on the ice, those two. Okay, fast forward to Vegas. New kids on the block, but they weren't messing around. Mark Stone, 2019.
Stone, a star in Ottawa. Vegas goes all in, and they make it to the Cup final that same year.
They showed the league they were for real. Okay, Washington getting Ovechkin, 2004. Another one of those, well, duh moments.
Ovechkin, a generational talent, rewriting the record books, led the Caps to their first cup in 2018. What a career.
And finally, Winnipeg getting Dustin Byfuglien in 2010.
Byfuglien, he was one of a kind. Could play forward, defense didn't matter. Already had a cup with Chicago.
He brought that winning attitude to Winnipeg.
A true difference maker.
Man, what a trip down memory lane. We've seen it all, haven't we? Steals, blockbusters, heartwarming moments, and everything in between.
It's what makes hockey so great, right? The stories, the trades, the players who become legends, and it's never over. There's always another trade on the horizon.
That's right. Speaking of horizons, we're going to take a quick break, but stick around, because when we come back, we're diving into the what-if trades. The ones that almost happened. You don't want to miss this. All right, hockey fans, we're back. And we've saved the best for last, right? Those what-if trades. The ones that make you wonder, what could have been?
It's like a parallel universe of hockey history, right?
Yeah.
Did the Canucks miss their shot at a dynasty? Did 2 Canadian rivals dodge a major shakeup? These are the trades that spark endless debates, and honestly, I love it.
Oh, absolutely. The speculation is half the fun. Okay, so let's start with one that almost blew the doors off the NHL back in '92. Eric Lindros in a New York Rangers jersey.
Oh man, that was wild. The Nordiques had a deal in place. Lindros to the Rangers, a huge package of players, draft picks, the whole 9 yards. Tony Amonte, Alexei Kovalev, even John Van Beesbrook was in the mix.
And then, just like that, it all fell apart.
20 minutes. 20 minutes after they announced the Rangers deal, the Nordiques drop another bombshell. They've got a deal with Philly. Can you imagine if that happened today?
The hockey world would implode. Twitter would go dark.
For real. Back then, it was all over the newspapers. Everyone was talking about it. They had to bring in an arbitrator to sort it out.
And the Flyers won. But can you imagine if Lindros had gone to Broadway? How different would those two franchises look today?
Mind-boggling, isn't it? One decision, and the whole league could have been different. Okay, ready for another one? Wayne Gretzky as a Vancouver Canuck.
Ouch. That one's got to sting a little for Canucks fans.
Yeah, Brian Burke, in his autobiography, he talks about how the Canucks were in serious talks with the Oilers, the same time as the Kings. Gretzky staying in Canada, but in Vancouver, it could have been legendary.
Imagine Gretzky with Smile and Linden. Talk about a power play.
Exactly. Would they have won a cup? Who knows? But it's fun to think about, right? Okay, one last what if before we wrap things up. A potential swap between two Canadian rivals, Toronto and Vancouver again.
Oh, yeah, the Marcus Naslund rumors. I
Yeah.
remember those. The Leafs wanted to shake things up, and Naslund was a rising star in Vancouver.
And the Canucks, they were thinking about bringing back a familiar face, a fan favorite.
Doug Gilmour. He was a beast for the Leafs.
It would have been huge. 2 stars, switching sides, each with a history with the other team. The storylines write themselves.
Biggest trade since, well, Gretzky to L.A.
Right. But it wasn't meant to be, I guess. We'll never know exactly why it fell apart.
Some things are just not meant to be, just like that shot that hits the post with .1 seconds left on the clock.
And that, my friend, is a perfect analogy for the world of what-if trades.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's a wrap on our deep dive into the wild world of hockey trades.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From those early days to the blockbuster deals, it's clear that trades are the lifeblood of this sport.
We've seen how one trade can change everything. A team's fortunes, a player's career, even the entire league. It's a reminder that hockey is more than just a game. It's a story, always unfolding, with every trade adding a new chapter.
And as long as the puck keeps dropping, the trades will keep coming. So keep your ears open, folks, because you never know what blockbuster deal or what-if scenario is right around the corner.
This is your host, reminding you to keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.